Shabana Mahmood has finally admitted what we all knew all along, what we can all see with our own eyes, which is plain as day, that is that the UK has lost control of its borders. Now, to her credit, as I predicted, she's been a little bit more candid and forthright, and probably the most honest statement that we've seen for some time, to say that the UK has lost control of its borders. Not just that we are taking back control, that we are maintaining control, that we are doing what we can to control the borders. We've lost control. And she goes further and says that the failures on migration are eroding trust in politicians and calls for an international response. Now, at that point, I have to say that I think that it is due, at least in part, to commentators that probably includes me, that speak out about these issues, not just relying on mainstream media, to make this a much more widely talked about topic, to put pressure on those in government to actually do something about it. Because if they don't do anything about it, it will get worse and worse. And yes, it has got worse since Brexit. I don't accept that Brexit was the sole cause, because even under the Dublin Agreement, it was still a two-way street in that migrants could be sent back to the UK as well as sent back to France. But it is true that they have got out of control since Brexit. Now, I think that is, excuse the expression, but I think that is France and other countries giving the proverbial middle finger to the UK to say that they are not going to be so harsh on preventing them from coming here, because clearly they have crossed the channel to arrive in Britain. You can see those, I'll show you again, that the small crossing statistics, absolutely out of control. The red line at the top being 2025, the one at the bottom being 2018. You can see post-Brexit, those numbers have gone up and they are going up astronomically. So we do need to do something about it. Now, Shabana Mahmood reported here will say that Britain's failure to control its borders is eroding trust in politicians and the credibility of the state in general. At a summit with Balkan interior ministers in London, she will issue one of the frankest assessments yet of the risks that the government is running if it fails to get a grip on the migration crisis. She will say that through international cooperation, that only through international cooperation can countries secure their borders. Now, I would say that is a very polite way of saying they need to take back migrants that have illegally crossed the channel. Not one in, one out with a net zero return and we'll only cooperate by having other migrants come back here and take, quote, our fair share and all of these sort of rhetorics. They need to be sent back because it is just not sustainable. But then, of course, the Home Office leans on its deal with France, the one-in, one-out deal, a bilateral agreement with Germany to prosecute smugglers and seize their boats, etc. And the EU reset, giving the UK access to key intelligence, border security, etc. But all of this, as Nigel Farage says, these words are meaningless while the pull factors remain in the UK. And to put it bluntly, they include hotels, they include the money they get, the food they get, and the ongoing support they get as a refugee. And ultimately, they can stay here long term, will be paid for by the taxpayer. If they get refugee status, they eventually get indefinite leave to remain, and they can remain on benefits for life. And when it comes to those who have committed criminal offences here, they jump through all of the hoops and take years per individual to go through the appeals process before they, if they are eventually deported, before they're eventually deported. This is obviously costing the taxpayer many tens of thousands of pounds again per individual, because invariably for these sort of human rights elements, they will very often, not always, but very often get legal aid to fight those cases. If you saw my off-the-record video just recently, you'll have seen just how outrageous one of these cases would be, where some guy is still fighting to stay in Britain to be with his current sponsor, who was originally a child victim of his crime. Work that out. Go and watch my off-the-record video. It is utterly outrageous. But then you can see here that this follows Shabana Mahmood's announcement that migrants will need to speak and understand English to an A-level standard. That, as I understand it, is not A-level English, but English to an A-level standard. But again, that's somewhat misleading. But in order to work in Britain, raising the level from GCSE equivalents, which was judged too basic to allow integration. Now, here's the thing. Not too long ago, I think people were criticised for saying that they should speak English. Some people suggested that that was racist to suggest that they should speak English to integrate in the UK, but now it's official. They're raising the standard to a level equivalent to A level for standard of English speaking and understanding. But whether or not this actually works in practice with these tens of thousands, count 35,000 plus this year alone that have illegally crossed the channel, whether they all learn to speak English to an A-level standard is quite frankly farcical. What they say, of course, is that these new rules, which take effect from January, require all migrants seeking skilled work to pass a Home Office approved written and oral test to be granted their visas. So it's only talking about those and isn't really targeted at illegal migration at all. It says employers will also have to pay more to hire foreign staff as a result of a 32% increase in the current £1,000 immigration skills charge from December 16. All this seems to me is that those are coming here, following the rules, coming here legally, it'll be more expensive to employ them, whereas the tens of thousands that cross illegally seem to somewhat escape it. Now, you will recall that I previously said that I think Shabana Mahmood will be a little bit harsher to deal with these things than most people give her credit for, despite the fact she was previously involved with Palestine rallies and so on. And this seems to be feeding into what I've said. She has said that she will do, quote, whatever it takes to secure UK borders and keep all options on the table, including questioning legal constraints such as ECHR. Now, I believe most of Labour still think that this should stick around, and Conservatives and certainly Reform say that they would scrap it because it's used in ways, even that Shabana Mahmood now agrees, used in ways that it was never intended. And in other words, using human rights arguments and aspects for criminals and others to stay in the UK is really not what ECHR was intended. ECHR was intended originally to create a consistent application of rights across all member states for absolute and fundamental rights, some of which are absolute rights and some of which are qualified rights. So you have an absolute right to life. You have a qualified right to freedom of expression, although we've seen what's happening with that just recently. And so we will have to see what really happens. But in my view, the only real way of dealing with this is to get absolutely tough and just insist that they are returned. And if it is admitted that the UK has in fact lost control of its borders, the only thing that a sovereign, self-respecting state should be doing is engaging the military to protect its borders. That is my genuine view. And it's cases like this one here, where this chap was filmed beforehand, before entering the UK, making threats to kill Nigel Farage, has now been jailed for 5 years. Now, of course, there are ongoing changes to the laws and regulations to deport foreign criminals. Again, Shabana Mahmood, the then Justice Secretary, said this government is taking radical action to deport foreign criminals as part of the plan for change. Deportations are up in this government. As with new law, that will happen earlier than before. They are looking for immediate deportations and bringing the amount that they will serve from 50% down to 30% into their jail terms so they can then deport them. It's worth saying that the power was always there. It's just not been as clear-cut as they say that they are changing it to be. But this is just one individual, and there are countless other stories. I've been unable to confirm whether these two chaps were illegal migrants or not, but there are many stories like it. And they've been, you can pause the video and read what they've been convicted of, so I don't trip up on any algorithm, but horrendous crimes, and doubtless there are many more, as we have seen in the news, that will come to the news for similar offences. And now when it comes to digital ID, my inbox has been flooded with emails from lots of you guys sending me screenshots and bits of information from the background, times where you've been required to put in information such as your biometric information, basic information that you really wouldn't expect to put in certain places. Even I received one from Xbox that said, at Xbox, we're committed to providing players with a safe and secure experience. So they want me to verify my age. And it says that they're partnering with Yoti, a trusted third-party identity verification provider, to give you a menu of options for how to securely verify your age. Starting early next year, age verification will be required for you to retain full access to social features on Xbox, such as voice or text communications and game invites. Until verification is completed, access to these features will be limited to friends only. So they are limiting my access to social features on Xbox unless I prove to them how old I am. Not only that, there are other apps such as this one. I think this is the Zero app, that not only is it requiring your name, but also your birth date and your height now. They insist on having to use the app. Now, whilst it might be useful for certain purposes, if you don't want to provide that information, you really shouldn't have to. And even worse than that, a lot of people now are reporting that you can see, this is what my viewer sent me here. In the middle, this Gov UK ID app right in the middle. They say they didn't download this. Now, I've seen a lot of people reporting this and saying that it was probably some other app that you use to log into something or other run by the government, and it's been updated and switched and now is becoming this ID app. So is this quietly sneaking in digital ID for those that didn't really want it? And on that note, they are going to try to roll this out in ways that you cannot imagine and you cannot escape from. And I've also received an email from someone who will obviously remain anonymous for various reasons, who works in cybersecurity at a very high level, at a very large firm, and has given me a lot of information, which I'm going to read into in just a moment. But this is all alarming because they are forcing people through, for example, here, to use digital ID to verify your identity for Companies House. They are going to restrict anybody from filing anything at Companies House unless you've gone through this verification. And it says if you are a director or equivalent, you will need to provide Companies House personal code as part of your company's next confirmation statement from 18th of November 2025. Also, people with significant control, so if you are a major shareholder. And if you don't do this, you won't be able to file things at Companies House. So they are taking steps to prevent businesses from running unless you comply with their laws. Now, just before I come back to a warning on data security, this video is jumping about a bit, my apologies, but just one that I have to mention here. Preston Byrne, who is an attorney in the United States, has effectively rebuffed Ofcom's challenge, where Ofcom has fined a US website, 4chan. Now, whether some people agree with what 4chan do or not is completely irrelevant. It's a US website, and Ofcom purporting to fine a US website under UK legislation is frankly risible. They are not going to comply. This is not me belittling UK legislation nor encouraging anybody to break it, but it's a US company under US law with the First Amendment. And as Preston said here, he replied to Ofcom's letters by email. In view of Ofcom not seeing sense after the last response, which advised them about the futility of this effort under US law, this time around I thanked Ofcom for providing excellent bedding for my pet hamster. Utterly unserious agency. This is quite literally making the UK an international laughingstock to other attorneys in the United States, where Ofcom purports to fine a US company and website under UK law in ways that relate to the freedom of expression, or what they call absolute free speech under the First Amendment. Now, you might be forgiven for thinking that this is just not real, but it's absolutely true. Ofcom reports that it has purported to fine 4chan £20,000 for failing to comply with its requests, and a further penalty of £100 per day, starting a couple of days ago, for either 60 days or until they provide them with the information. What they've requested is a request for a copy of its illegal harms risk assessment, and a second request relating to qualifying worldwide revenue. As a result, it says Ofcom has fined 4chan £20,000 and will impose a daily penalty. Now, like I said, whether you agree with what the website does or not is irrelevant. Whether you think they should comply with this or not is irrelevant. And just so I'm absolutely clear, the laws in the UK, including the Online Safety Act, the government can claim authority over any online platform that is accessible in the UK, even if it's based abroad. So they can, in theory, under our law, fine a foreign company up to 10% of its global turnover if they fail to comply with the content moderation or other requirements. And that does include US-based companies if the services are available in the UK. The logic there is, obviously, if it's available in the UK, it must follow UK laws. However, the US will have a different perspective on this. Let's be absolutely realistic and clear. And I'm sure Donald Trump will very soon have something to say about this. Now, the First Amendment in the United States protects free speech more robustly, far more robustly than the UK law does. They still have defamation and all those kind of things, but they do protect the First Amendment right to free speech. Now, let's be absolutely clear. The US is not going to enforce a UK judgment or fine that contradicts the First Amendment in the United States or any other public policy that contradicts such a thing. Now, when it comes to free speech generally in foreign jurisdictions, the US has the Speech Act 2010, which expressly blocks foreign defamation or speech-related civil judgments being enforced. Now, whilst this Ofcom fine is not a civil judgment in that sense, it is a regulatory fine, I am reasonably sure that the US is just not going to enforce the collection of a fine on US soil by a UK regulator with anything to do with free speech or anything related to free speech, even if it is in a regulatory capacity to provide risk assessments and all this sort of stuff. Now, again, regardless of whether you agree with what the website does or whether they should comply because it's accessible in the UK and whatever is irrelevant. It's just not, in my view, it's just not going to happen. Now, what the UK might do is, because they've refused to comply or refused to pay the fine, is they might take steps to block the website, which of course then is going to upset the United States yet further. And even then, there'll be ways around it by using a VPN. Now, this video is not sponsored, but I do work with NordVPN, and there is a discount for it in the description below. You get 4 months off using my link, nordvpn.com/BBB. Now, this is not a sponsored video, but I do work closely with them, and I have no problem telling you that that is one way that you'll be able to get around it if they do block websites in the UK. Now, back to data protection, digital ID, and warnings, security warnings given to me by a cybersecurity specialist who's emailed me in confidence. Says as follows. Dear Daniel, I've followed your channel for some time and appreciate the conversations you're driving. Thank you very much. For obvious reasons, I must remain anonymous given the current climate in the UK. My viewer says, I work in information security as a data security engineer. My job is to understand how data flows, where it is stored, and how it's exploited. Put it simply, I hunt threats. And from that vantage point, I can say with certainty that digital ID is a disaster waiting to happen. Now, I will say that I've looked at my viewer, they do have the credentials, and this is a serious warning which you really must heed. Now, my viewer highlights the concerns with Estonia, which was hailed as the gold standard of digital ID. I think even Labour referred to it just recently, and said that they were forced to suspend hundreds of thousands of digital ID cards after critical flaws were discovered. If the most advanced system can be compromised, what chance does the UK rushed Brit card have? I personally agree. Salesforce drift attack and the Jaguar Land Rover breach show how even global enterprises with vast resources fail to protect sensitive data. Yet governments claim they can build unbreakable ID infrastructures. History proves otherwise. Once a digital ID is compromised, it isn't just a password reset, it's your entire identity permanently exposed. Please take heed of my viewer's expert warning here. The darker truth, my viewer goes on, is that these systems are not just about access, they're about control. Digital IDs can be switched off. One policy change, one security incident, and you're suddenly locked out of banking, healthcare, even travel. We've already seen outages and suspensions abroad that have left citizens stranded. And this is only the beginning. The so-called secure infrastructures are a facade. The endgame is physical tagging and continuous surveillance. RFID and NFC implants trialed in Sweden for payments and workplace access. Biometric wearables, earbuds, VR headsets, smartwatches, normalizing 24/7 monitoring of heart rate, location and behavior. Bluetooth and Wi-Fi tracking, already deployed in retail and transport, quietly mapping out human movement. There is a larger picture, my viewer says. At the World Economic Forum in Davos 2020, historian Yuval Noah Harari warned that humans are becoming hackable animals. He explained that once biometric and behavioral data is collected, it'll be possible to understand humans better than they understand themselves, predicting, manipulating, and ultimately controlling behavior. This is not just surveillance, it's about re-engineering human decision-making itself. All of this feeds into the same trajectory, turning humans into hackable assets. Data's the new currency. Once centralized, it becomes the ultimate weapon. My viewer says they see fallout daily. The dark web is overflowing with stolen identities, corporate leaks, government data dumps. Companies either look the other way or don't even realize the information is being siphoned off. Digital ID will only accelerate this, creating a single point of failure for every citizen. Your platform, my channel, is one of the few places where this can be said plainly. People need to understand digital ID is not security, it is exposure. And once it's here, there is no going back. These are the expert views of one of my viewers working at the very heart of data and digital ID disaster. Please take this seriously. Next time you are asked to vote, please do vote. But remember, whichever party it is, if they are pushing digital ID and you don't want it, based on all of these warnings from someone who has called upon me to share these views with you on this platform here on my YouTube channel, please take this seriously and consider your vote wisely. And with that, I thank my viewer, I thank you, my viewers, and thank you all for watching.